All right, so for this next question, a student sent in, I'm going to read part of it to you because it's a lengthy question. And before I answer it, I do want to say that I certainly appreciate people sending in questions that have to do with personal experiences. And I certainly want to be of use to anyone who's studying Ayurveda or yoga or psychology with me. And one of the kind of frustrations maybe for students is that Ayurvedic educators, you'll give an example of something happening in your life and we'll say, well, can't really answer it fully, but that's because in an Ayurvedic intake, when you work with an Ayurvedic professional, there's an enormous amount of detail we'd like to know about not just what's happening for you that's problematic in your physical, mental, emotional, spiritual body, but also we have to know a little bit about each of those koshas or aspects of your whole mind body system in order to properly answer a question. Digestion always plays a part in how we're looking at either psychological issues, physical issues, emotional, spiritual issues. Sleep does. We want to know a little bit about your diet. We want to understand your lifestyle, all those three pillars, right? So um, I don't want to upset the student who asked this question, but it may not be fully answered because I don't know all the information I need to know to properly answer it. But let me go through it because I think we can give some support for this individual's concern. Okay. So the question is, this particular student is in their Vata stage of life. They're in their late 50s, and they had a Ayurvedic professional let them, they did a consultation and they were told that they were Vata Pitta constitution. Great. For the past couple of years, they've been having reoccurring nightmares, which is unusual, she said, or he said it hadn't happened prior to this. And they were disturbing scenes. And they usually occurred prior to waking at 2 or sometime between 2 a.m. and 6 a.m., which of course is the Vata time of night, which they identified. And they noticed when they woke up, they had certain physical symptoms. They had heat in their body, they had palpitations or movements in their heart, and they had shortness of breath. So let's just pause there for a minute. So what does that tell us, right? It tells us that they were having some pitta inflammation, right? That heat in the body, and some irregular heartbeat. That's a palpitation. It would be an irregular heartbeat, right? Faster than normal. And that they were not breathing deeply and evenly, right? They were having an irregular breath or a short breath. So there's definitely some symptomology of imbalance in Vata and Pitta because of, we're assuming, because I don't know all the information, but we're assuming, or at least they're identifying, it's because of some disturbing dreams they've been having that reoccur during the Vata time of night. Let's go on. So they gave some information, not a lot, but some good information, that they have a regular sleep schedule between 10 p.m. and 6 a.m. It's great. So that's not disturbed. The waking is, but not the sleep schedule. They said that their diet consists of healthier foods, no heavy fried foods or any meats. Okay, which is great to know, but what we need to know is like, how do they digest? Like, how does their body break down those foods? How does the Agni cook and digest those foods? How is their evacuation? These are kinds of the information that we would also need to know. They shared that they drink daily in a very moderate way. So that can cause, depending on how they digest, it impacts the liver, which is Rajaka Pitta, which could create some heat in the body anyhow. So just an idea. They talk about in the winter, they do need to wear extra clothing because they get very cold. Well, they're in their late 50s. If this is a woman, it could be because she's perimenopausal or menopausal. I don't know the gender, so I can't really speak to that. The question at the end of the information is that they would like to know from both an Ayurvedic and a Western psychological perspective, how might this condition be understood? Because they haven't had nightmares. They've had pleasant dreams till now. Well, I wish I could give you a better answer, but I do need more information. I mean, one of the things that we know from this is that you tend to have more of the qualities or the attributes, the little gunas, right? The qualities of Vata and Pitta in your constitution. So it's not surprising that those are two of the doshas, we see a little imbalanced in what you're describing, right? Plus, you're in your vata stage of life, so that makes sense as well, you know. A lot to say about dreams from both Eastern and Western psychology. And, a lot of times, depending on what you've been doing, what you're doing in your life, what's happening in your day-to-day life, that can come up in your dreams almost as a rehearsal, right? That's not the kind of dream this person seems to be having recurringly. Um, Dreams can be interpreted from a Jungian psychological point of view with some very specific ideas. So Carl Jung, Jung, might be someone you want to research about some of the images that you shared, because there would be some information in there from Western psychology about how we might interpret that a little bit more. In Ayurvedic medicine, we say the dream state is very important. And when it's disrupted in this way, we do see that people with Vata and Pitta do have a tendency to have intense dreams where there's a lot of movement. And you're describing intense dreams. And in the dream, there's a lot of movement, like the floating, right? So, I think one of the things I might suggest, and again, I don't really have enough information to give you the kind of answer I think you're looking for, which is, what to do about this. But I would look at working to really ground and calm Vata before you go to sleep, even though you don't have a problem going to sleep. I might try that 99 drink that I shared in our talk, the Rasayana. Um, with regard to the heat, I mean, I don't know. Maybe not drink alcohol for a couple of days and see, does that change some of that energy in your system? If you're perimenopausal, you're going to have some hot and cold dysregulation. If Pitta and Vata are imbalanced during menopause, you don't have to have that, by the way. It's not a given that will happen in menopause, but if Vata and Pitta are dysregulated, especially Vata, you might. But the symptoms you're describing from a clinical point of view, and I don't know if this is what you're having or not, would be some anxiety, right? Those are traditional symptoms we see in Western psychology of anxiety. And so waking up with anxiety often in a clinical sense means that there's things you haven't processed. Well, it happens to all of us. Something might have happened in my life and life was moving quickly and I may be revisiting it in my mind. I'm trying to understand it. I'm trying to make sense of it. And oftentimes, remember, dreams don't make sense, right? I might be walking down the stairs into a big pool. That's never going to happen. But a dream isn't linear. Remember, a dream is a very different state of mind. So, I would look at maybe bringing more grounding asana, maybe a nice 2-to-1 breath, really a longer exhale before I go to bed. I would look at really trying to cut down on the alcohol, at least for a couple of days, see if that impacts some of that anxiety response or heat response. And maybe look up in Carl Jung's books something about the images that you're having and seeing what the associations are from a more traditional dream analyst, which is what Carl Jung did. Um, and from an Ayurvedic point of view, what you're describing, we don't know a lot about other aspects, so we can't really give a true vikruti or imbalance. But we know there is some sort of dysregulation, at the very least, in Vata. And the Vata is pushing on the Pitta, and that's where you're having a little heat release as well. So working to really ground Vata, meaning a lot of downward moving energy to kind of really get steady, forward folds, wide-legged asana, longer exhalation and breath, eating some more grounding foods, cooked and moist, because Vata needs to have warm, moist foods to cook, maybe having the 99 Rasayana. And from a Western psychological perspective, we really want to see if we can decrease that breakthrough sleeping so you can get right through there with your sleep cycle. So working on some of the breathing techniques we use now in Western psychology to help you get through those broken sleep cycles. So the 4-4-4 breathing, breathing 4 rounds, inhalation, exhalation on your back, and then turning onto your right side, 4 rounds of breath, turning to your left side, 4 rounds of breath, and turning to your back. There's any number of different breathing techniques you can use to try to get yourself back to sleep. And there's cognitive techniques in Western psychology. A recent one that a dear friend of mine is using is when you wake up in the middle of the night, think of a word, whatever the word is. Maybe the word is sun. And so you then think of all the S words you can think of, all the words you can think of just spontaneously: star, sugar, sound, spirit. And then when you exhaust that, you go to the next letter. And if I'm thinking of sun, as in my son, S-O-N, I'd think of all the O words I can think of. And by the time you get there, you're probably going to be back asleep because we've redirected the brain. It's a neurological cognitive intervention. Anyhow, with more information, I could be of more use to you, but hopefully that gives you some things to think about. And maybe you can then use some of those resources from Western and Eastern psychology to get through that vata break in time with those disturbing dreams. I hope you do. I hope you feel better.